There are moments in life when pain becomes so dense, it no longer feels like pain. It becomes silence, a kind of emotional numbness that creeps under your skin, replaces your voice and makes you wonder, not how to move forward, but if there's even a point. Maybe you've been there, or maybe you're still there, functioning, smiling, answering messages, going to work, while carrying a quiet kind of despair no one sees. This isn't depression in the clinical sense. It's something deeper, a metaphysical wound, a rupture. Between you and the world, you and yourself, you and any sense of why most people don't talk about this place. Because to speak of it is to admit defeat, to confess that, somewhere along the way, life stopped making sense, and we're not sure when it happened or how to fix it. But Viktor Frankl did talk about it. A Holocaust survivor, psychiatrist, and existential thinker, Frankl knew suffering, not as theory but as reality. He watched human beings stripped of everything, freedom, dignity, family, even their names, and yet, in the middle of that horror, he noticed something staggering. Some people still found meaning, still found why. And in that why, they found the strength to endure the unendurable. Frankl wrote, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. But what if you don't know who you are anymore? What if pain has hollowed you out so completely that the only thing left is a question?" That's where we begin, not with a solution, not with hope, but with the raw, unfiltered honesty of standing in the wreckage of your inner world and whispering, "I don't know how to keep going," because that is the doorway, not the end, but the threshold of something sacred. Before we continue, if this type of content resonates with you, subscribe to the channel by clicking the button below. This way, you'll be notified whenever more content like this is released. There's a kind of suffering that doesn't just wound you, it rewrites you. You start to forget what you were like before the pain. You lose the taste of joy. Laughter feels distant, forced, and slowly, without even realizing it, you start to organize your life around the wound. You stop making certain plans, stop opening up to people, stop dreaming too big, because you've already seen what life can do when it decides to take everything. The pain becomes a reference point, a tool. Compass, a wall, and after enough time it becomes identity. This is the split Frankl understood better than most. He saw it not only in concentration camps, but also in the so-called free world. He saw people living under the illusion of choice, when in reality they were still imprisoned, not by barbed wire, but by meaninglessness. He wrote, "Suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning." But let's be honest, that line hits differently when you're deep in the void, because when you're hurting, meaning feels like an insult, like someone tossing you a philosophy book while your house is on fire. You don't want theories. You want relief. You want someone to see you, really see you, and not offer quick fix solutions. You want someone to say, "Yeah, I know that place. I've lived there too." That's the first part of reclaiming meaning, realizing that pain isn't weakness, it's a signal, a protest of the soul when it's been severed from its purpose. But here's the thing Frankl realized. The wound, no matter how deep, does not have to become your home. Yes, you've suffered, but you are not your suffering. Yes, you've been betrayed, broken, beaten by life, but you are not the story of your wounds. There is a part of you, even now, that remains untouched, unbreakable, buried maybe, but waiting. And when you begin to sense that, even faintly, the first fracture in the prison walls appears. Because while pain limits your world, meaning opens it back up. Even when nothing has changed on the outside. When life falls apart, the first instinct is to try and grab onto something, anything. We reach for routines, for people, for plans, even for pain itself, because chaos is unbearable. And so we build walls, emotional strategies, narratives that give us the illusion that we're still in control. If I just stay strong enough, no one can hurt me again. If I prepare for the worst, maybe it won't hurt as much. If I act like I don't care, maybe I won't fall apart. But here's what Viktor Frankl discovered in the darkest corners of human suffering. Control is not where strength comes from. Control is what we cling to when we're terrified. And it's precisely that terror, the fear of powerlessness, that chains us to suffering long after the moment has passed. Frankl saw people in the camps who had lost everything, families, health, freedom, dignity, and yet some of them still chose how they responded. Not because they were stronger, not because they were invincible, but because they discovered the only real freedom left to them, inner freedom. He wrote, Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. That line isn't comfortable, it's not soft. It doesn't take your pain away, but it gives you something more valuable. It gives you power, not the power to stop the storm, but the power to decide who you are within it. When you give up the illusion of control, something radical happens. You stop fighting what's already gone, you stop negotiating with the past, and in that surrender, that quiet, painful, conscious surrender, you open the door to meaning. Because meaning doesn't come when you control life. It comes when you stop letting life control you, and that's where true responsibility begins. Not the kind built on guilt or shame, but the kind rooted in radical self-honesty. So the question isn't, how do I make the pain stop? The question is, what will I choose to do with it now? We grow up believing that purpose is somewhere out there, in a career, a calling, a cause, something to chase, achieve, become. But what happens when all of that is stripped away? When you're left staring into the void, with no career, no clarity, no direction, just the silent ache of existence and the question, what now? This is where Viktor Frankl turns the entire concept of purpose on its head. He didn't define meaning as a future you arrive at. He defined it as a stance, something you take in relationship to this very moment. In Man's Search for Meaning, Frankl wrote, "Life ultimately means taking the responsibility to find the right answer to its problems, and to fulfill the tasks which it constantly sets for each individual." In other words, life is always asking something of you, even in your lowest point, especially in your lowest point, not the kind of demand that shames you or pushes you beyond your limits, but a quiet, sacred question. How will you respond to this moment? Not how will you fix it, and not how will you escape it, but what truth will you embody now? What part of you will rise to meet the weight of this moment? Frankl believed that purpose is born from encounter, the encounter between you and life, in its most brutal, unfair, or empty form. And in that encounter, you have a choice. You can shrink, numb yourself, wait for the suffering to pass. And this is where everything changes. You can step forward into the tension and ask, what is this moment asking of me? Sometimes the answer is courage, sometimes it's patience, sometimes it's just staying with the pain without trying to fix it, but always, there is meaning waiting to be revealed. Not found like a treasure, not created like a product, but uncovered, like a buried flame inside your chest, and it only appears when you stop running from where you are. There was a moment, many in fact, when Viktor Frankl stood on the brink of total collapse, starving, shivering, watching fellow prisoners die beside him. Everything he once had, his home, his manuscript, his wife, gone. And yet, in that horror, a question emerged that would define the rest of his life. Not why is this happening to me, but what is life asking of me even now? It sounds almost inhuman, almost cruel, but Frankl wasn't being philosophical to escape reality. He was diving straight into its darkest depths, because when the why me question becomes too heavy to carry, that's when this other question rises. What is life asking of me right now? It's not a question that gives you control. It doesn't erase your grief or undo your trauma or rescue you from despair, but it gives you agency. And that is everything. Because the moment you shift from victim to responder, not reactor but responder, you reclaim the tiniest ember of your own freedom, and that ember, fence enough. Frankl watched this question keep people alive, literally. Those who still had a sense of responsibility to a child, a cause, a dream, even to the suffering itself, they endured longer. They didn't just survive, they chose to, because something inside them whispered, this moment will not be the end of me. And that choice, that soul-level decision, is meaning. It's not always beautiful. Sometimes meaning is choosing not to give up today. Sometimes it's holding on to your dignity when everything tries to strip it from you. Sometimes it's just breathing and not letting the pain become your definition. But always, meaning is a response. It's your answer to suffering, not a justification for it. So here's the question again, and this time, let it land. What is life asking of you in this exact moment? Not tomorrow, not next year, not when the pain finally fades. Now. There's a kind of pain that breaks you, but there's another kind, a rarer, deeper, that remakes you. Not because it's easier, not because you're stronger than most, but because at some point you stop asking, how do I survive this? And start whispering, what is this turning me into? This is the space where Frankl's philosophy meets myth, where psychology becomes soulcraft, because suffering, when met with awareness, becomes alchemy. It takes what is unbearable and transmutes it into something holy. But let's not romanticize it. Transformation doesn't mean that you smile through grief. It doesn't mean you pretend the pain was worth it. It doesn't mean you say everything happens for a reason. No, it means you face the reasonless and still find a way to respond. It means you carry the ashes of who you were and let something unexpected grow from them. Frankl didn't believe suffering was necessary for meaning, but he did believe that once suffering finds you, as it always does, it contains within it the potential to shatter your ego and reveal what was always hidden beneath it, your essence. Not the personality you crafted, not the mask you wear in public, not the version of you that needs applause, validation, or understanding, but the raw, unvarnished soul that whispers, you are still here, you still matter, even now. Pain is brutal, but in its brutality, it removes the noise. It strips away the illusions you were taught to need, and in that silence, you begin to hear something ancient. A truth that no belief system, no teacher, no quote could ever implant in you. The truth that the worst thing that ever happened to you might not have killed the most important part of you. In fact, it might be the only reason you ever discovered it. That's the alchemy. Not turning pain into gold, but turning pain into truth. And from truth that comes the kind of strength that can't be taught, only earned, only lived. When everything else was stripped away, when the cold crept into his bones, when food was a fantasy, when death walked side by side with every breath, Viktor Frankl clung to one thing. Not logic, not ideology, not even hope in the traditional sense. He clung to a memory, the memory of his wife. He didn't know if she was alive or dead, but her image, her presence in his mind, became his lifeline. He wrote, I grasp the meaning of the greatest secret that human poetry and human thought and belief have to impart. The salvation of man is through love and in love. But this wasn't sentimental. This wasn't escape. This was a kind of sacred hallucination, not delusion, but revelation. A truth deeper than pain, that even in the darkest human experience, love still survives, not because the world allows it, but because the soul insists on it. Frankl understood that love, real love, is not bound to physical presence. It's not limited to relationship status or whether someone stayed or left, lived or died. Love is choice, a decision of the will. A tether between souls that no amount of horror can sever. Even in suffering, especially in suffering, love becomes the most defiant act. It says, you did not kill me. You did not take from me what matters most. You cannot erase what was real. And for many people, that memory of a child, a partner, a friend, even a lost version of self, becomes the axis around which the shattered world slowly begins to reassemble. But here's the deeper truth Frankl offered. You don't need to lose love to discover its power. You only need to see it clearly, to stop using it as an escape from suffering, and instead let it become the reason to walk through it. Because when you realize that love, even in memory, is a source of meaning, not just a refuge from pain, you stop begging life to give something back, and you begin to give something forward. There comes a point in suffering, and not always, but often, when hope dies. Not dramatically, not with a scream, but quietly. A realization that what you prayed for isn't coming, that the person won't return, that the situation won't resolve, that the pain might not go away. And in that moment, it's when hope slips through your fingers. Something terrifying happens. You're left with nothing to hold on to. No plan, no dream, just space. And it's in that space that the next great choice appears. Frankl didn't offer cheap comfort here. He didn't say, keep hoping. He didn't tell you to visualize success or manifest a better outcome. He said something harder. He said that meaning does not require hope. Meaning requires presence. Purpose, in its truest form, isn't built on outcome. It's built on engagement. Even when everything seems lost. Even when the future feels dead. Even when the only thing you can do is suffer with dignity. Frankl called this tragic optimism, not the denial of suffering, but the insistence that even in suffering there is something worth embodying, Sometimes meaning is not what gets you out of despair, it's what meets you inside of it and refuses to flinch. Because what if meaning was never about fixing your life? What if it was about how you carry yourself through the ruins? The world loves stories of redemption, the comeback, the breakthrough, the healing arc. But Frankl reminds us, some people never get that. Some people die in the camps. Some stories never resolve. Some pain stays. And yet, even then a person can live with such inner clarity, such fierce presence, such unwavering commitment to the act of being, that their life becomes a silent act of rebellion against despair itself. This isn't optimism, it's defiance. It's choosing to be human in a world that keeps trying to make you disappear. So if you've lost hope, good, let it go. Now ask something harder, something holy. What will I choose to become, even here? We've been sold a dangerous idea, that healing means moving on, that one day the wound will close and we'll forget the pain, and life will return to some perfect, painless version of before. But Viktor Frankl knew better. He didn't talk about closure. He talked about integration. Because some wounds never close, some losses don't get better. Some chapters in your life don't end, and they echo forever. And the goal is not to escape them. The goal is to weave them into your being, to let them shape you without breaking you, to carry the scar not as shame, but as sacred memory. This is what Frankl meant when he said, in some ways suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning, not because the suffering disappears, but because it no longer defines you. It informs you. It becomes part of the architecture of your soul, a room you don't live in anymore, but one you'll always visit. And when you return, it's not with fear but with reverence, because that pain, that loss, that moment you thought would destroy you, it gave you something, maybe not something you wanted, but something true, something real, something yours. Integration means saying, yes, that happened. Yes, it broke me. Yes, it changed everything, and I'm still here. That is not weakness. That is strength in its rarest form, because while the world tells you to get over it, Frankl says something else. Bring it with you. Let it walk beside you. Let it whisper in your quietest moments. Let it shape your kindness, your compassion, your hunger for truth. Let it become part of your meaning, not the end of your story, but the root from which the next chapter grows. There is a truth so quiet, so ancient, so personal, that most people spend their entire lives avoiding it. And yet, it's always there, beneath the trauma, beneath the chaos, beneath the masks you've worn just to survive. The truth is this: your suffering has been trying to bring you back to yourself, not punish you, not break you, but call you inward, into the parts of you that were forgotten, neglected, buried. Because pain, in its rawest form, is a form of awakening. It shatters the illusions that kept you numb. It pulls your attention away from the distractions that never fed your soul. It strips your life down to something essential, and in that stripped down space, you begin to hear the whisper you've ignored for too long. Come home. Come back to the part of you that doesn't need fixing. Come back to the part of you that still remembers who you are, even when everything else has tried to make you forget. Frankl didn't say healing was about becoming someone new. He said it was about becoming someone true. Someone who no longer lives in denial of pain. Someone who no longer builds identity around success or applause or the illusion of safety. Someone who has walked through the darkness and brought themselves back, not because someone else saved them, not because life got easier, but because they made the decision, the radical, terrifying, soul-defining decision to become whole. Not perfect, whole. Because the most dangerous lie is not that you are broken, it's that you are only broken, but look at you, you're still here. You've carried grief like oxygen. You've held yourself together with breath and will and silence. And now, you know that meaning is not something you wait for. It's something you meet again and again, in every honest, trembling step forward. And now, as promised, here is the final reflection, the call woven gently into the closing of this journey. And hey, if you've been feeling stuck in emotional loops, struggling with inner conflict, or sensing there's a part of you you've never fully understood, you're not alone in that. This guide we've put together dives deep into exactly that. It'll help you understand why certain patterns keep repeating, face the hidden parts of yourself you've been avoiding, begin real emotional healing and self-integration, Reconnect with your true, undiluted self, if any of that speaks, to something you've been quietly carrying. Check the first pinned comment under this video. It might be exactly what your soul has been needing. No pressure, no rush. Just when you're ready. Before you go, the next video on your screen goes even deeper. Click it. Your next breakthrough might be waiting there.